Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this Tuesday edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and on the show this evening,
it is a great source of shame when this disaster struck. The most burning public debate was around fears that the resources allocated to respond to this disaster would be misappropriated or wasted.
President Cyril Ramaphosa, national and provincial parliamentarians unite in support of the victims and survivors of the floods, but not without some drama and political grandstanding.
Madam Speaker, the Premier is not telling the truth.
Withdraw.
I withdraw, but this man who steals water is not telling the truth.
Thank you very much.
We'll bring you some highlights from that 3-hour special joint session of Parliament. And 2 CEOs raised the ire of workers after the publishing of their salary details. One of them has earned 300 million rands in 1 year. Fair or obscene? That's what we're going to interrogate this evening. All that and more coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts now. President Cyril Ramaphosa has once again warned that a government will not tolerate the abuse of funds earmarked for the flood-ravaged KwaZulu-Natal and parts of the Eastern Cape and the Northwest. He says the Auditor General and the National Treasury will be among those who will monitor just how the funds are used. Ramaphosa was addressing that joint sitting of Parliament on the devastation caused by the recent floods.
As the rebuilding and reconstruction of the flood-stricken areas has begun, government has vowed to root out fraud and corruption. Ramaphosa revealed that some of the funding will come from the reprioritization of budgets and from contingency reserves. He says details of procurement will be made public to ensure transparency and public scrutiny.
It is a great source of shame when this disaster struck. The most burning public debate was around fears that the resources allocated to respond to this disaster would be misappropriated or wasted. This shows us just how tired the people of South Africa have become of corruption. It is a stern reminder to all of government and businesses providing goods and services that the people of South Africa will not stand for acts of self-enrichment at the expense of those who have already lost.
Priority is being given to humanitarian relief, the provision of water and electricity, and access to road. While some parties have welcomed the move, they remain skeptical.
Don't guarantee that relief aid won't be stolen when you know that your party has a looting problem. Don't describe your relief effort as massive and urgent if it's anything but. We need to have a live dashboard to share real-time information on dam levels and water usage. And you need to be able to communicate the repair of infrastructure to people. People need to know who is in charge of coordinating government's disaster response.
We already heard about the corruption taking place at this time. As we speak, I can assure you that there are certain hyenas and vultures waiting at the gates for the funds and the gates to be open so that they can loot.
Others say they will be on the ground to ensure that relief funds are not misused.
As Parliament, we have taken a decision to establish an ad hoc joint committee on flood disaster relief and recovery, among other things, to ensure a coordinated oversight approach and oversee the response and implementation of the relief measures by government. We will also provide the mechanisms and platforms for communities to voice both positive feedback and criticism to those providing humanitarian assistance and for them to receive the appropriate redress for issues.
The monies that will be made available to deal with the disaster must be fully accounted for, and they must be utilized to fully authorize state institutions. We cannot hand over the functions of government to unelected people. The state, together with the citizens of KZN, must lead the rebuilding to that province, and anyone who is found to be stealing from the citizens must be arrested.
I therefore call on government officials and leaders to search their consciences. There is no peace for those who steal from our people. Disaster can strike at any time. Make sure that your hands are clean.
The raging fire, which destroyed shacks in Langa outside Cape Town, was also highlighted as one of the recent disasters. Lula Mamaja, SABC News, Parliament.
President, of course, did also give the parliamentarians context within which things happened, saying from the 8th to the 13th of April, the coastal parts of KwaZulu-Natal experienced extremely heavy rainfall, causing severe damage in the eThekwini Metro and the districts of King Cetshwayo, Ilembe, Ugu, and Umgungundlovu. Now, listen to this. The eThekwini Metro received around 30% of its annual rainfall in one 24-hour period. Put differently, as the president put it, in just one day, the city received the equivalent of 110 days of rainfall. So you can imagine the damage. No wonder, in fact, the damage we saw is to the extent that we have seen it. He then went on to count both the human and infrastructure and other costs of the flood as the state prepares to allocate monies for the rescue and rebuilding effort, for which it is going to ask parliamentarians approval. Now, in KwaZulu-Natal, eThekwini Metro alone, you've had over at least 435 lives were lost in the province. In fact, including 58 learners and 1 educator. 54 people missing or unaccounted for, including 5 learners. Over 5,700 houses have been completely destroyed. 10,000 houses have been partially damaged. Around 630 schools have been affected. Over 100 schools are not accessible as we speak. And there has been substantial economic damage, especially at the port of Durban, which is one of the biggest ports in the entire continent. And that's just KwaZulu-Natal. If we move to the Eastern Cape, the damage there, we're talking about 4 districts that have been affected: Alfred Nzo, Krisani, Joe Gabi, and Owar Tambo. 2 people died, 3 were injured. Around 1,000 people have been affected by the destruction of houses, whether in full or partial damages. But there's also been extensive damage to roads and bridges in those regions, but also disruptions to water and electricity supply. And if we go to the third and last region, which is the Northwest, the districts affected are Bujanala, Dr. Ruth Mpati, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, and Ngakamudiri Mulema. About 1,535 houses were damaged in that province. So the whole point then of going to Parliament today was for the President to give Parliament a sense of the damage that we have seen. But of course, as monies are going to come out, whether it is from Treasury or the various departments that are going to reorganize their respective situations to try and get this money from other votes because it wasn't budgeted for. So after all that exercise would have been done, Parliament would of course have to approve of whatever allocations are going to be made and what needs to happen next. So it was important today to get everyone to read from the same hymn book, so to speak. But opposition parties were generally in support, albeit with some reservations, others with question marks or skepticism even. Some feeling that a lot could have been avoided or done differently ahead of the floods that caused the damage we're talking about. Take a listen to what some had to say.
The notion that this disaster is an act of God must be dismissed as a convenient excuse to avoid accountability. An inquiry to whether this was not as a result of cloud seeding gone wrong must be conducted so that the problem can be properly isolated. It is common cause that the technology of today has advanced such that the condensation of clouds can be artificially assisted. All geoscience faculties across the country must work together and advise municipalities in terms of the topography, in particularly the natural drainage system, floodplains, the physical and chemical properties of certain sediments. Town planners must work much more with geoscientists so that the laying of bulk infrastructure is underpinned on and informed by geological setting of that particular area. The ATM strongly suggests that the entire country must be geologically rezoned so that all floodplains are declared unfit for residential and business purposes.
Honorable President, yes, indeed, it's a natural disaster, but I think a lot of this could have been avoided. I must agree with Honorable Steenhuisen because I too have been making call after call after call, Honorable President, and the executive of eThekwini municipality was nowhere to be found. That is a fact. Now, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, why do we need to wait for 435 people to lose their lives to ask the question, why, and why? Did we not see these people living on those riverbanks? Did we not see them living with these conditions where there's no proper water and sanitation? The stormwater drainage not working? Did we not know that these people are moving from rural areas into urban areas because there's not enough development in the rural areas? So what is the lesson that we need to learn here, Mr. President, in order to avoid, and you rightfully alluded to the fact that this is a natural disaster and we're going to have more of it, whether we like it or not. What are we going to do to prevent these things from happening in the future? Now we're going to move people to better ground. It's something we've said before. Let us start building houses in better ground with proper facilities for these people so they don't have to go through them. It's not difficult because we're building these houses, so let's build them under better ground, wood, water, sanitation, electricity there, so that they too can live with dignity.
What transpired in KZN and Eastern Cape was a demonstration of the consequences of global warming. It requires full attention by the government and the whole of civil society in partnership to repair the damages and make it a point that wherever possible in future, such devastation is not able to recur and destroy many lives again like this one has done. Let us remember that there were similar floods in Durban area in 2019, which were to a smaller scale. We should have taken that as a warning sign. Engineers and other people with the relevant skill set should have been immediately deployed at the juncture to set off this threat. What are the bitter lessons? As alluded earlier, infrastructure development must be maintained at a higher standard for bulk services such as underground flooding and water and sanitation facilities. Proper care must be taken to ensure that housing contractual standards are maintained. It is very clear that many houses were allowed to be built in areas that were not geologically safe to do so.
some of the issues, political parties who felt that some of the things could have been avoided. You just had some of them there raising their concerns. Of course, what would have been a parliamentary debate without some members taking potshot at others? Well, here's the leader of the official opposition, John Steenhuisen, having a go at the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal after that infamous water incident.
Madam Speaker,
It's unparliamentary and you
Madam
know
Speaker,
that.
he is lying, and that is the truth. I went to Inanda and to Tongaat, and the news reports are there for anyone to see. The Premier is lying.
Honorable member, you said you are a liar, and I'm saying withdraw that, with all due respect to you.
Madam Speaker, the Premier is not telling the truth.
Withdraw.
I withdraw, but this man who steals water is not telling the truth.
Thank you very much.
The Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, with some assistance from his own comrades, wasn't about to take it lying down.
Thank you, Honorable
Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker.
Yes.
The leader of the opposition has used another offensive language in the House by saying that the Premier has stolen something. I think it's offensive language.
Honorable Steenhuisen, you are a leader. Hold on, Honorable Mazon. Honorable Mazon. Yes, point of order.
Honourable Speaker, it is a point of fact that doesn't require any motion that the Premier himself went on SABC radio and himself...
Honourable Mazon, you said it's a point of order.
...his own accommodation.
Take your seat.
And that means that he's
Take your seat, please.
stealing water.
Take your seat. You are making a speech. There's no point of order.
Well. Still coming up, what's fair and what's obscene when it comes to CEO salaries? Unions are crying foul after 2 salaries were revealed this week and got everyone talking. But also, remember these sins?
Some of the decisions of our tenure, most of the decisions of our tenure, and where we find ourselves at the moment, cannot be divorced to what we inherited and the decisions of our predecessors. So, if we are going to be asked questions around some of the issues that are happening or not happening as ESCOM today, unfortunately those are not devoid or cannot be separated from what we found at ESCOM when we came in.
If this is how you behave in the board, you're not going to behave like that. And I know what cameras do. I know what they do. They do this. So either you behave yourself or you excuse yourself from this meeting.
I excuse myself.
Yeah, I think you just do that.
I think I should also. Thank you.
I think you should. Every night. Then you were wanting to leave and live, and so you are engineering this.
Well. The chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts has now apologized to the board member of ESCOM you saw there, Busi Mavuso. Will bring you that apology in a moment. Don't go away. Well, 2 CEOs have raised the ire of workers after the publishing of their salary details. One of them has earned 300 million rands in 1 year. Fair or obscene? the MTN, and on the other hand, got over 75 million rands, if I am not mistaken. Now, the question we are asking this evening is whether this is fair. Unions have actually complained that this is a matter that they have put in the public domains, that in a country suffering so much inequality, are these kinds of salaries actually justified? Well, here to talk to us about this matter is the president of AMCU, Joseph Matunjwa, whose union has, of course, been involved in wage negotiations with Sibanye Stillwater, which is one of the which is what CEO is the one who got 300 million rands in a year. Mr. Matunjwa, good evening. Thanks very much for your time this evening. What went through your minds as you got to learn that Mr. Froneman has received 300 million rands?
Good evening to you, and good evening to your viewers. Yes, it comes with no surprise to us as AMCO. This earnings does not start today. You remember the Marikana massacre, where the state massacred workers who were toiling under the belly of the earth without being paid properly, and the state decided to kill them and massacre them, which we call it Sibanye Stillwater massacre today, because they bought loan meal. And that was a true indication that the state wanted to please the foreign direct investors in the expense of their own people. And these neoliberal economic policies, the free market policies that this government is laboring on, it will never address these triple challenges. 27, 28 years down the line, we are still struggling to address unemployment, poverty, and inequality. So how on earth, when you see the minerals that's supposed to address this inequality, is channeled to a one person who's earning 215 rand per second, more than the national minimum wage of 23 rand. The person who's earning 1,500 per minute. And remember, these minerals is not his vegetable garden behind his house. These are the minerals that people fought for. Our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, they were maimed and killed fighting for these minerals to be enjoyed by every South African. But still today, after 28 years, these white monopoly capitalists, they are still enjoying their life as if we've never voted. They are untouchable. Froneman, his mine has killed more than any mine who has killed breadwinners, workers, but is being compensated with 300 million. He's the same Froneman who insulted our government and said it's a failed state, incompetent, no leadership, but we've never had any word coming from the African National Congress reprimanding him, or even the government itself. He's enjoying his rights since the Nationalist Party government, which they've embraced and voted for. Their rights, their wealth is still untouched, but he's got a decency to insult this government.
Well, I mean, from the article that's in Media 24, who spoke to Sibanye Stillwater spokesperson, the explanation is that salary increase is inflation linked, but also there are a lot of course, incentives, as we know, that are built into that. And from where they sit, the company has grown from strength to strength under Froneman, and he had to be generously compensated for that.
I mean, I'm still saying the minerals and the wealth that is beneath the earth, it's supposed to benefit every person in South Africa, every South African. Go and look in West Rand, where Sibanye is operating. Go and check at Marikana where Sibanye is operating. The hosting community, they are not having even proper houses. Look at the roads. You can look the whole infrastructure, water, and everything around Sibanye is depleted, and the communities are not benefiting anything. There is nothing can justify that Neil Froneman must get 300 million. During the pandemic, many workers never received full salaries. Some of them lost their lives, but he cannot even give his employees 1,000 rand, whereas most of their executives with their salaries and bonuses is almost 1 billion rand. You know, if you can dismiss Froneman today, you can employ over 2,315 workers. So if we can deal with the salaries of all the CEOs, in particular in mining, from Sasol, Anglo, you name it, we can drastically address the unemployment of this country. We not need the Fronemans of this South Africa who will earn 300 million in the expense, of the people who are loitering under the poverty line. What is it that is doing, in the mining? He doesn't go underground. I don't think he knows what is happening in underground, except of taking the wealth and making his life indispensable. That is what he's doing, in the expense of the people who really need this money. We only ask for 1,000 rand. Froneman is earning 1,500 per minute, whereas workers are asking 1,000 increment for the whole month. How do you justify this obscene salary for Froneman? That's why if we were still working according to the charter and all the commitment that the African National Congress made, that let's nationalize these mines. These mines is meant to serve the nation. These mines and these minerals must be serving each and every person in South Africa, even in the province where there is no mining, but they must feel the trickle of this wealth, into their livelihoods.
Not even the argument by people who are outside of Sibanye-Stillwater, but who have been watching this space, who say worldwide, what Sibanye-Stillwater has done here is not unusual, probably more the norm, that a company of the size that he is running would easily pay the kinds of amounts and incentives that they've paid to Neil Froneman.
We cannot keep on comparing ourselves with other countries whereby they've never experienced what we experience as South Africans from the from the nationalist government. The government that was built was formed under injustice and inequality. So therefore, if the same world is telling us that we are most unequal society in the world, then you've got a person who benefited from the nationalist government and still continuing as if there are no people sleeping on the street, there are no people going to bed without a food. How do you justify that? How can he earn more than the state president for that matter?
I want to take you back to the conversations or negotiations you've been having with Sibanye-Stillwater among other employers. What was their attitudes? In other words, what were the reasons? Remind us of the reasons you were given again when you are asking for more money from the workers.
They are saying it's unachievable, and then it's unreasonable when you ask for 1,000 rand. But it's reasonable for Froneman to earn 300 million. And it's obscene. It's obscene, it's not acceptable. Hence, we are going to call a secondary strike from the platinum sector to support our members of National Union of Mine Workers and AMCO to show Sibanye that these minerals does not belong to him. These minerals belong to every South African. Every South African must enjoy the wealth of this country, not himself and his family. And what is so disappointing, even in his board, there are patriotic South African black leaders who are in his board. How do they allow such obscene money going to Froneman? How do they approve 300 million, whereas they cannot approve 1,000 rand increment to a member or to a worker who's supporting more than 5 to 10 families?
Have you had any conversations since becoming aware of this among the unions or worker leaders, that is? Have you had any conversations about whether this is a matter you hope to or intend or even just considering taking up with the company, or are you going to leave it here?
You know, we spoke to, let me start by saying, the strike, it's a labor caucus strike. It's a National Union of Mine Workers and AMCO jointly. We are in the strike. We did go and table their insult wage offer revised increment of 800 rand, which they are calling 850. They remove money from housing allowance and then subsidize the salaries. All the workers, all the members of National Union of Mine Workers and AMCO has rejected that offer. And we've written to them and we're requesting a meeting. But the question one should ask, why Froneman has so much power here in South Africa? That's a question that is puzzling us. Froneman behaved like a prime minister. Actually, I call him a prime minister of South Africa. Self-appointed prime minister of South Africa. He can insult the government without any consequences. I mean, if he was in West Africa, East Africa, saying this is a failed state, I'm telling you today, Froneman will be in jail. But here in South Africa, he can just urinate to this democracy that he never sweat, he never lost any of his family or any neighbor. It's only us black people who suffered, I mean, for this democracy, even though it's not going the way we thought it will be, but still does not give him any audacity to insult and urinate in this government.
What is your suspicion, though? What do you think lies behind his enormous power, as you say?
You'll remember after the Marikana massacre, there was what they call it, Ekurhuleni declaration. There were peace accord, and the AMCO never signed those documents. And the simple reason why AMCO didn't sign those documents was based, our point of departure was there shouldn't be any politician who's got a shares in the mining after we have experienced the Marikana massacre. So hence AMCO under the former state president Zuma, we never signed those documents because we said any politician, any person who is in the government must not have any shares in the mines, because there are many people who are not in the government who are supposed to be the one that running the business. Those people who are in the government in the senior position, we are paying them through our tax. So therefore, we never signed. So I think it's a matter of some of the politicians are part of this mining industry. Whenever you remember, even you can name them, the finance minister or governors, they happen to be the board members of the Harmony Gold, you name them. The list is endless. So I think it's where he's getting his power that, is wailing upon the workers. So hence we are calling for the Commission of Inquiry, which is informed by the Commission of Inquiry report, which was entrusted to the former state president Thabo Mbeki around 2013, which was called ONTAC report on illicit financial flows. You know, if we can have a Commission of Inquiry on illicit financial flow just directed in these mines, Zondo Commission of a state capture will be a child's play. I believe that is nothing what has happened at Zondo Commission. Yes, there's a lot of money disappeared whatever that happened to that state committee. But I'm telling you, if the state president, Honorable Cyril Ramaphosa, can commission a commission of inquiry on illicit financial flow in these mines, I'm telling you, the Zondo commissioner will be just a child's play.
Now, this year we're going to mark the 10th anniversary of the Marikana massacre. I know that, there have been issues between you and Sibanye Stillwater over the past few years, especially. Have you started any conversations around the 10th anniversary, or whether perhaps you could even go back to holding, commemorative events together, or whether they'll be coming to the party in any way? Have you had such conversations?
Sibanye is arrogant, and Sibanye is not our bosses. Sibanye is arrogant in such a way they went and erect a wall of remembrance of the disease, of the victim of the massacre, without even consulting the families. That is how Sibanye behaved. And you could see clearly why Sibanye was given Lone Mean. As you'll remember that the workers of Lone Mean wanted to buy Sibanye. They had more than 6 billion in their in their provident fund. Hence, AMCO was opposed for Sibanye to buy Lone Mean. That was for the same reason. And you could see the relationship, or the work relation with Sibanye and AMCO. It's so very tense, it's fragile, it's dismissing all our leaders, left, right, and center, in order to paralyze AMCO. That was his mission. So hence we didn't want, we spent money to oppose Lone Mean to have a monopoly on the platinum, because we knew what was coming. If they're telling us that they care, we requested them that they must pay the widows and let them go home and look after their children, pay them until pensionable age, the same salary that was paid to their husband, who passed on during that Marikana massacre. So they've never done it. So they've nothing that they have done for the workers injured and arrested, and even the widows. They are still toiling under 40 degrees Celsius underground, getting into those cages with 200 men, male men, going underground to try to get, livelihood for their families.
Just a quick last one. I remember when we spoke to the Solicitor General last year, and there were, outside now of the other set of demands that you have been making, some of which you just spoke to. There were the outstanding matters between that were to be ironed out about, how much to pay for what and so on. Were those matters which the Solicitor General said at the time that they were being discussed and will hopefully be finalized sooner rather than later, were those discussed outside, that is, of some of the stuff that you spoke about just now?
Yes, I was speaking to Advocate Limpofu, I think 3 weeks ago. They are saying, yes, indeed, they did receive some correspondence from them, which I believe that before the 10th anniversary, all those monies will be settled. I believe so. But also, you'll remember that there were demands that were put before the state president, Honorable Cyril Ramaphosa, which he acknowledged and signed, which hasn't done anything about it. Among them was the apology and to declare the 16th of August as the Workers' Day in South Africa, and other demands that were put forward, of which we think those demands were very reasonable, but to date, no traction to those demands.
That's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much for your time and for indulging me further. That was beyond the issue we were supposed to talk about, which is the salary package of Sibanye Stillwater CEO Neil Froneman. He was awarded 300 million rands last year, according to the company's annual report. And unions, as you have just heard, Mr. Matunjwa, they have been up in arms because they are in the middle of conversations, in fact, negotiations with Sibanye Stillwater about worker salaries, and Sibanye is refusing to budge. But if you look at the amount that they're prepared to pay their CEO, the unions say it is really not on. It's a matter that, of course, they are going to continue to pursue. But we'll leave that matter there for now. And up next, SCOPA ESCOM meeting that gave us that drama a couple of days ago. An apology has just arrived about an hour ago or so. We'll take you through what that apology says. It's an apology by SCOPA's chairperson, Mkhuleko Hlengwa. That coming up in a moment. The chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts, IFP-MP Mkhuleko Hlengwa, has issued an apology. It reads in part, on Monday, the 25th of April, at this ordinary meeting, the IFP-NEC requested a briefing from me on the set of circumstances which characterized the SCOPA meeting with the ESCOM board on Friday, 22 April 2022, with a particular focus to the interaction with board member Ms. Busisiwe Mavuso. I briefed the ANC accordingly. While the NEC has accepted my explanation and upholds the rules of Parliament where correctly and upholds that the rules of Parliament were correctly invoked insofar as the construct of SCOPA is concerned, the party asked me to reflect on the matter in which the rules were applied and to give due regard to how Ms. Mavuso may have felt, considering the sentiments she expressed on Radio 702 on Monday, the 25th of April 2022. I have done this accordingly, and I wish to express an apology to Ms. Mavuso, which I will convey to her in due course. I accept that the situation could have been better handled. Then he goes on to thank his party for what they did, the intervention that is. And then he goes on to say, while my exchange with ESCOM during the SCOPA meeting escalated into the manner that it did, it was an exercise of my responsibility as chairperson to caution against attempts to draw SCOPA into partisan politicking in the discharge of its work. But we're going to leave you with, it says there's a couple, maybe I should take the couple more paragraphs that are left. Boards and executives of state-owned entities have a fiduciary responsibility in law. The board directors of ESCOM are the accounting authority of ESCOM and thus carry the burden of responsibility and accountability. Oversight and accountability are often uncomfortable, especially when so much is wrong in the country. But they are a necessary exercise of our constitutional and democratic dispensation. Those who hold office through election, appointment, or deployment must accept that they will be held accountable for how they exercise their duties and for the performance of their respective entities. Apology, but also an explanation of what actually happened. Well, you be the judge as to whether this is an apology or not, or the kind of apology that should be issued under the circumstances, given the acknowledgements that have been made in the same statement. But we'll leave you with that drama that unfolded that we saw yesterday on this program.
Some of the decisions of our tenure, most of the decisions of our tenure, and where we find ourselves at the moment, cannot be divorced to what we inherited and the decisions of our predecessors. So, if we are going to be asked questions around some of the issues that are happening or not happening. As ESCOM today, unfortunately, those are not devoid or cannot be separated from what we found at ESCOM when we came in.
If this is how you behave in the board, you're not going to behave like that. And I know what cameras do. But you know what they do? They do this. So either you behave yourself or you excuse yourself from this meeting.
I excuse myself.
Yeah, I think you best do that.
I think I should also. Thank you.
I think you should. Then you were wanting to leave at 11, so you are engineering this.
Yeah, it's just fine.
Yeah, yes. And we're making fundamental recommendations about yourself and your very unprofessional conduct. It's in fact politics of the gutter as far as I'm concerned. Yes.